At the New Jersey SBDC Network, our mission is simple: to help businesses grow and succeed. Our consulting, training, and information services make it easier for businesses to reach their potential. Whether you're currently in operation or just starting out, we have the right tools, resources, and expertise to help you succeed. Visit us online to get started on your path to success today.
A pleasant good afternoon to everyone. My name is Sakoa Bell. I am an event coordinator for the NJSBDC at Rutgers-Newark. And on behalf of Dr. Tendai Andoro, the regional director, I would like to welcome you to our Preparing Content and Item Submission for eCommerce webinar. For those of you here that are unfamiliar with the SBDC, it stands for Small Business Development Centers. And here at the NJSBDC at Rutgers-Newark, we serve as the premier provider of business training and technical assistance services to establish small businesses, startups, and as well to entrepreneurs. We are one of 12 centers in the NJSBDC network, and we service those in Essex County. Our center is hosted by the Rutgers Business School and funded through a public-private partnership agreement between the Small Business Administration, Rutgers University, and the New Jersey Business Action Center. Our mission is to help entrepreneurs as well as business owners start and grow sustainable, successful businesses through the delivery of one-on-one business consulting, training, and technical assistance programs. Now, these services are provided to you at no cost and are paid for by your tax dollars. If you or your business is located in Essex County, our website is www.rnsbdc.com, where you can request counseling. And on the top right-hand corner of our site, there's a button labeled Request Counseling. Clicking on that button will lead you to fill out information, including the help you are seeking for your business. And within 24 to 48 hours, a consultant will reach out to you for an assessment. For those of you that are not in Essex County, our other website is njsbdc.com. And on this website, you can type in your county and it will refer you to your local SBDC office. For the benefit of everyone attending today's webinar, your audio has been muted, and we will be taking questions via the Q&A feature here on Zoom. We do have the chat feature on, but the Q&A feature will help us to remain organized and have the questions and answers in one designated area. So please feel free to post your questions, and we will do our best to respond during or at the end of the webinar. A copy of the presentation slides, along with a video recording of this webinar, will be emailed to you within 48 to 72 business hours of the end of the presentation, so that you can refer to this information long after the end of this webinar. It is now my pleasure to introduce to you our presenter for today's presentation, Ahmed Akdad. Ahmed is CEO and owner of Styremont and is an SBDC consultant here at the NJSBDC at Rutgers-Newark in the areas of e-commerce, self-hosted and marketplaces, online strategic planning, and supply chain sourcing. Now, without further ado, I will now turn today's presentation over to Ahmed.
And good afternoon, everybody. I'm going to go ahead and pull up the presentation now. So the topic of today's webinar is primarily revolving around preparing content as well as an understanding of how item submissions work for e-commerce. This will pretty much apply to all three models of e-commerce. So whether you're doing self-hosted and you're creating your own website, or you're setting up on Amazon Seller or eBay, or if you're working as a supplier to any of the retailers who do e-commerce, which is like Home Depot, or Walmart DSV. We're not going to get into the exact nitty gritty of like the templates and the submissions, but the point here is to highlight some of the important factors and give some of the best advice about what you should have, what you should think of, how you can prepare. So this way, when you are getting around to creating your items, you can actually get started with the highest quality content, because on e-commerce, that's the most important thing, because when the customers are shopping for the items and they look at your listing, these are the information that they are going to be considering. So breaking down some of the basics of the product content. The title is the most important data for your item. This is what usually affects the search term visibility. So whenever someone's searching something on the website, in the marketplaces, your title will generally be the first thing that gets checked to match it to the search results. And it's also the first thing customers will see, usually next to the image of the main image of the product, whether it's on phone or on the computer. Anytime you search for an item, you will always see parts of the title. You should note that there is usually a limit from in marketplaces of how long the title can be, and some might have guidelines to how your title should be structured, but that doesn't limit your ability to input more information into it. You just need to balance that out with ensuring that your title doesn't get too long, because those extra parts will get cut off at a certain point. So the title will still be visible, but it won't show up to the full title, won't show to the customer unless they actually click and go to the listing page itself. So in the search results, you want to make sure that your title is showing everything it needs to be showing when the customers are searching to find the product they want to purchase. Now, bullet points are important because that's the next thing that customers look at following the images. And even if it's for some reason there are no images, it's the first things that they look at. So these are usually 5. That's not a limit. If it's your own website, for example, feel free to add more points if it's relevant. But basically, these 5 points should be distinct, and they should highlight certain features of the product that you believe the customer should know. Um, it can be anything from any top features, any kind of marketing or advertising aspects of it. So kid friendly, family friendly, pet friendly, those are terms you can use. You can mention something special about the product that makes it stand out. You can mention cleaning instructions or maintenance or installation, basic installation instructions. You don't need to go into detail because you can do that in the descriptions or the details section, but you can present some of that basic information. And a common thing that people do is also they put in color, size, or design information. Your title will likely mention it, and the image will likely have it. But for SEO purposes, some people put into the bullet points a the specific design or the specific pattern, so they can increase the likelihood of it showing up, whether it's as a search result or if someone is searching online. And this is especially important if you are building your own website. You do want to have all the valid content information, because uh, your website relies on that search engine optimization, because your challenge with your own website is that you need to bring traffic in. So making sure that you have all the necessary keywords there in the bullet points, and all the relevant information, is always a benefit. And any safety notices, if applicable. It depends on the products you're selling, but if it is a product where you do need to make a notice or a disclaimer about some kind of safety aspect, you can go ahead and put that there too, because that's usually where the customer will see it first. Now, the descriptions and details, these are the bulk of your product's information. So the description you can put your bullet points into your descriptions as well in paragraph form, and then put in any of the additional information. Here's where you can break down. You can, some people, to make it easier, they just break down their bullet points. So they'll put the bullet point and then they'll put in a few sentences expanding out and providing additional information. You can bring in your brand as well. Some people like to put in a few sentences introducing their brand in their description. That's always helpful too. So you have control over how your description can be set up, and it's usually recommended you fill it in with as much information that's relevant to your brand as well as the product. And then the product details section, this is filled out with fields. So generally speaking, whenever you open an item, there will be fields that you have to put product information into. product dimensions, the product's color, product size. Some categories have their own distinctions because there are certain aspects of the other categories that have stuff you want to feature or you want to provide details on. Cleaning, whether it's properties in 65, anything involving that. Um, there are fields that are usually optional when you're opening an item, but I usually recommend that you fill out every relevant field whenever you're opening an item, just so you can ensure that the details pop up. One, it's SEO, and two is if you get a customer who has any questions before they, try to contact you or leave a question if there's that feature on the page to leave a customer question. What they'll do is they'll try to look at the details first. So if you have that answered there, that will satisfy whatever they're looking for, and they won't have to get around to contacting you to try to clarify it. That way, you can reduce the amount of time you spend in responding to the customers, and more time just trying to get those sales going. So having all relevant details put in is ideal. But obviously, the main goal when you are creating an item is to have the item open first, and you can always add that details once you have the item open. I just recommend that even optional sections get filled out as long as it's relevant to your product, just because of the bonus it adds there. Now, when it comes to images and videos, I would say that next to titles, these are important because customers can't see your product physically in e-commerce. So your images are essentially going to give them the visual representation of the product and help them gauge whether that is a product they want to have, whether they think it'll fit into, whether if it's clothing, if they like the style, if it's some kind of furniture, if they like to see it in the house. They might try to gauge the size of it. So if they're looking to use it in somewhere, they might try to use the image to get an idea of how large it is or how small it is. So the images are vital. Generally, 5 or 6 images depicting different angles and different functions or features, different parts. If it's something with multiple parts, anything like that will only be sufficient to start with. It'll give the customer the most representation, um, and one lifestyle image should be added with it. And a lifestyle image, I'll show an example in later slides, but essentially that's just something where you see the item in use or being used for whatever its actual purpose is. So in the case of clothing, it being worn. In the case of furniture items or wall or anything interior design related, to see it inside the building, and any kind of machine products, in its location, looking like it's being used for whatever purpose. The reason for that is usually just because it adds a bit more visual diversity to your product, and sometimes for some customers, when they see it, when they see a lifestyle image, it's the item clicks better than just regular standalone images, because that way it helps them, instead of trying to imagine it in whatever use, they just get the direct picture showing that item wherever it is being used in the way it's intended to be. When it comes to videos, it's still something that marketplaces are slowly developing. But if you have your own website, or Amazon right now does should have it set up so you can add videos as well. But videos are helpful too if the marketplace lets you upload it. It doesn't have to be long, and when we get to the page on videos, I'll provide some more information. But it's an option. It's still technically optional right now because it's just not as well supported. But if you are able to make video or prepare videos and put that on your site or anywhere, that tends to be helpful too. One thing that people do is that if they don't have if they're not able to make an actual video, live video of whatever the item is, simply because it's not something you can, really make the live video of, because it's just static objects. You put it somewhere, you don't actually use it in any way, or it doesn't have any functions you need to show. One thing people usually do is that they make a animated slideshow. So basically, it's just a video that's actually pictures, and then they throw in some content information in there. So they'll write bullet points in that slideshow, and then use that as the video. That's acceptable too, and that tends to increase some of the customer interaction, because if they see a video, they might take a look at the video and get the additional information, which could help boost your listings. Keywords are a back end matter. You won't see them on the listing itself, but every marketplace, including your own website, will have some impact with keywords. Search algorithms and SEO will be impacted by the amount of keywords you put in for those products. And marketplaces are very generous with how many keywords you can put in there. So I usually recommend that you put in as many relevant keywords as you can come up with for products when you are creating them, because you just want to increase. It's not going to majorly tip the balance. You won't see a major boost, or you won't see it immediately, but over the long term, it will help tip the scale slightly in your favor, simply because there's more data showing with the keywords for your product, which will generally help in regards to search visibility and SEO. So there's no reason not to, because you will have the keywords. Because when you are the fastest way, in fact, is you basically make keywords out of your description and details. So you take down the relevant feature words, you take any of that relevant information that it can be loosely relevant. So maybe it's just broader category, but anything that has to do with your product can pretty much be made into a keyword, and then you can put those keywords into that keyword section on the back end, with whatever marketplace you're using, or whatever platform you're using, in the case if you're hosting on your own website. So it is something that you can easily prepare, put in, and try to see if you can get a bit more of that benefit out of it. But there really isn't a reason not to put in keywords, simply because you might be missing out on opportunities, simply because you just didn't put in any of those keywords, and that affects your search visibility and SEO. I put dimensions in here as a separate aspect, because there's a secondary importance to these. It's not so much as something for the customers. Obviously, you'll be putting in size, and the dimensions will help them determine the product's fit. But a second reason to have dimensions, and that ties more into the shipping dimensions, shipping dimension data, is that this data is actually something that the marketplace uses, or the carrier uses if you're self-hosting and you're buying shipping labels. You want to make sure your dimension data is as accurate as possible, whether it's weight or measurement. You don't want to put in any extra length or width or height, or a little over. You don't want to round up, or make sure everything is as exact as possible. Just because the way that the shipping works is that sometimes some people might have 1 pound more weight with their product, and suddenly their shipping fee increases a good bit more than what it would have been if they had put in the exact precise value. um, Unfortunately, that's just the way, because of the way the shipping rates work and how they do their calculations. That makes it a huge impact. So you want to be as precise as possible, just so you're not ending up in a situation where you might be paying extra for shipping, but you don't have to be paying that extra. You want to avoid those kind of situations. So making as precise as possible. And then whenever you have situations where it happens sometimes, but if the carrier reaches out and says, this product actually weighs this much, and they try to charge more because they're saying it weighs more. If you had that precise data ahead of time, and you had measured your products ahead of time to be exact, you can actually go ahead and dispute that claim by trying to prove that your product weight was actually this, and then trying to get them to find out what they did wrong. Because when they do measure it, generally you can trust that they are getting the measurements and the weights of your product, but you never know the quality at which they're doing it. um, if there's something else on the scale, if maybe that day they didn't calibrate it properly, you don't want to get stuck with having to pay a little extra because you didn't check the exact data and record it yourself, and you have to rely on the whatever they're reporting. It's one of those matters of trust but verify. So if you have that verification info on hand already, you'll feel confident knowing that if you do get a situation where you're being told that there's a certain weight or height discrepancy, you already have recorded evidence on your hand to be able to dispute that, to make a correction and avoid any extra charges. So we'll hop into titles first. I gave a high level overview, and these sections will pretty much just give some example image and some common best practices. Like I mentioned, marketplaces will have a character or word limit for their titles. That technically works in two ways. The first way is the limit where they cut off the text. So as you can see here, the second item in that picture it has those three dots. That means it got cut off. They are allowed to write at that length, but whenever it gets searched, and this is from a desktop, so on mobile it'll probably be shorter and more of it will be cut off. But basically, the first limit is where it gets cut off. Unfortunately, there is no exact data on that given by the marketplaces. Some marketplaces will actually tell you that this many characters, and then it'll get cut off in search results. But some other marketplaces don't bother providing that data. In which cases you'll either have to check the marketplace, see what products are being sold, and see which ones are getting cut off. Counting the characters and seeing where they get cut off, or a matter of trial and error in where create the product, upload it with the title, and then go check your title and see if the full thing is showing. It shouldn't be something that becomes a major issue, because once you test one, that number of character limits will apply to all products. So if you're not able to find that information, and you can't find an example on the website that has something cut off that you can use as to count, you can experiment with an item to try to get that number, because having that in hand is helpful when you are creating your content, your title. So the common format, and note that this isn't something every marketplace requires. Some of them have their own format suggestions, especially if you're a supplier or a vendor to an online retailer. They tend to have their own I should say, their own guidelines or their own title standards, simply because they have their own method set up for SEO, and they want all their suppliers to create products with that structure that they use to ensure that their marketing team is getting the best results when trying to bring in customer traffic. But the default thing that you'll see in a lot of places is the title will have the brand first, then the design, then the category or the type, or category and type, and then size and color. Note that this isn't this like I said, this changes by category. So you'll see in the titles here that it's not necessarily set up that way, um, because the way Amazon's this is Amazon's example, and Amazon, when it comes to apparel, their search results actually differ a bit, and that is something to also take a look at. Some categories will have titles written in slightly different ways because of the way that the marketplace presents it. So in the case of apparel, you can see here Amazon does an image, and then those circles are the variations, so different color options, and then it does the brand name in bold, which isn't in the title. It's actually the data provided in when creating the product, and then it'll have a basic title that reflects what the listing is, but it doesn't write any of the colors because it's applying to the entire variation. So I can't speak for a general standard for every category, just because the way the websites set up their designs will affect it. But generally speaking, the commonly accepted structure, if you don't have if it's generic and you don't have any of those considerations, is that you would create the title where you would have your brand, your design, the design on the brand, category type. You can flip those two, but generally it's people usually put the design and then the type, or the type and design in the after the brand, just so when a customer is looking at it, it's the first thing they see in the title. And then size and color come towards the end. Size depends on what type of product it is. If it's not something that's relevant to size, so you're not selling clothing, you're not selling some kind of rug, for example, then you might not need to necessarily put the size in, because the actual size details will be inside the product. And if you're selling a fridge, for example, they're going to know it's large, because unless even if it's a smaller fridge, the picture is going to be there, and it's a mini fridge, so they'll understand. So you don't need to really write the exact size in that case. And color is also if a color matter is relevant. So if there's something that different color options, you put color in there. So this is the generic one, but I usually recommend evolving past this generic setup to fit into that respective marketplace and that respective category. And the easiest way to do that is researching the category that you are going to be selling in, or you're currently selling in, and seeing how the best sellers have it set up. There will be some variation how they have it set up, but more or less you'll get an understanding of where they're prioritizing the information in their title, and then you can use that as the inspiration for creating your own titles and improving upon the generic version set up here. Now, I separated lifestyle and images because there's certain aspects of lifestyles that I'll be able to bring up. Note that I wrote with minimum 1000 by 1000 pixels. Now, some marketplaces and your own website might not really have that as a technical restriction, but I generally recommend 1000 by 1000, because that's the point where you'll start getting like making sure you're maintaining the quality of that image. And some marketplaces have it set up where any image past this size or past 1500 by 1500 will zoom in if someone clicks on it. So when they click on the image, it'll zoom into it, and then they can take a look at the exact details in a zoomed in way. So for the high quality purposes, this should be the minimum you're striving for in regards to the size of the image. Now, I know there'll be issues where you might have a more rectangle image. What usually happens there is it's bring what you should bring one side to at least 1000, and you can add white space to fill out the rest of the space in there. It'll still look like a rectangle on the page, but it'll help you meet that 1000 by 1000 without stretching the image, because if you change the height of the image directly instead of adding the spare white padding around it, what'll happen is that you'll distort your image from a rectangle into a square, and that will affect quality. So if you are for some reason dealing with a lifestyle image that's rectangle, you usually just want to make the width 1000, and then you can add white space to the top and bottom to pad out to a 1000 by 1000 size. In fact, what I mean by padding is, if you look at the example I shared to the top of it, where it contrasts on the blue title section, the header section, you can actually see in the image that there's a white border around the image. That essentially means that they put in white space padding to the image itself when they were preparing it. For a square, it's not something that is always required. The only times you would do that with a square is if you happen to receive a rather low quality square image of the product, and you're not able to scale it up too much. For example, if you received a 600 by 600 square image, and if you try to increase that to 1000 by 1000, you can by keeping it a square, but because you got a low resolution in the first place, the quality won't improve. The low quality aspects of it will show when it gets expanded out into a large size. So what people do is that they increase it a little bit, maybe by 100 by 100, and then they put in the white space around it, so you get 1000 by 1000 without sacrificing the quality of it. So speaking about the making those updates to the images, well, I know not everybody has experience with photo editing, and that's not really a major issue, though it's something that I recommend looking into. Just you know, it doesn't have to be Photoshop. It can be, even Paint, and just knowing how to create that white space and put the product in there. That can be helpful to learn. Like I said, it won't be required. If you know somebody who can, you can, have them do it. If you can hire freelance people on websites like, Fiverr or Upwork. Will do those kind of things for cheap in batches, so you can give them a lot of images and they'll prepare it for a rather good price. But the reason I bring it up is because images are very important nowadays, especially nowadays with the e-commerce. I mean, they've always been used, but everybody has been pushing to increase the quality of their images. So customers have pretty much gotten used to, getting high quality images that they can look at, including lifestyle images. In fact, it used to be where one lifestyle was generally sufficient, but now customers want to see multiple lifestyles if that's a relevant item. One client of mine, for example, they sell into home decor products, including rugs, and it used to be where they would just have one lifestyle of the rug in the living room, but now they have that lifestyle images of that rug in different types of living rooms and other rooms, maybe the bedroom, the dining room. So they put in multiple lifestyles because and it did help with the sales, because customers just, are starting to get used to it, and they want to be able to see those products and visualize them in different settings, and you giving it to them on a plate generally helps with that aspect. Um, so what I mean by it can be CGI early on, essentially means one thing that some people do when they can't get a lifestyle image of a product is they get a background where their product will fit. So whatever background it is where their product might be relevant, and then they just put it into that setting. Um, that kind of reduces the costs. Some people even use a green screen or tarp for that, a green screen tarp for that. It's not required for you. It's something you can think of later on, but it's the middle point between having no lifestyle, or having no lifestyle, and paying to get lifestyle images, where they have the actual props and everything set up in the room and they're taking it. Those tend to be a little expensive. So there is a middle ground where you basically take a cutout of the product, and then you paste it into a room or a setting where it fits into, and then you make small adjustments get made to it to fit in. It won't look perfectly natural, but it generally does get the job done until you can get around to actually, creating enough revenue to consider paying to get actual professional photography done. So there is middle grounds, and they do work, and marketplaces usually won't complain that you are having a lifestyle set up like that, because as long as it gets the message across, and helps with your listing sales, that's the main thing that you are going to be looking for. And then later on, you can always make the improvements as necessary. Um, but I always recommend that you check with the manufacturer distributor if you are purchasing a product from, the factories, or you're working as an official distributor for a manufacturer. Uh, Generally, manufacturers and distributors will have some kind of imagery available, because they have to post the products pictures, and make catalogs and all that kind of stuff that involves having some kind of lifestyle available as well as pictures. Sometimes they won't be the best, because they don't have some, if they, they're not selling online, so print quality or just getting the message across for them is the basic things, the basic threshold that they're aiming for. But if you are able to check with them and see if they can send imagery to you, especially like some kind of lifestyle imagery, that can give you a bit of a head start. That way you don't have to take the imagery yourself. You can always start with whatever they might have for the products, as long as it's not very low quality, like anything below 500 by 500. You can generally use whatever they send your way. Otherwise, you can always take the pictures of the products yourself, using some kind of clear backgrounds, and then we'll get into the images next, actually. So when it comes to images, um, I took this as an example from Wayfair, so you can actually see the thumbnails at the bottom. You see there are two lifestyle images, but then three lifestyle images. But you can also see this is what they call the main image, because some marketplaces require the main image be the product itself and nothing else. So what that means is it's a product on a white background. You can actually prepare these for most products. Yourself. The easiest way, if it's not too large an item, is something with a plain white background. It can be a white wall. If it's small enough, you can even just tape white paper to the wall and then put the product on like a chair or a table in front of it and then take a picture that way. It won't be the most professional picture, but as long as the item is clearly visible, you'll able to get started that way. So that is an option. There's a lot of flexibility you have here. You don't really have to, everything doesn't have to go through a studio in the beginning, if you are trying to work on a budget. So there's a lot of ways around it, but minimum 1000 by 1000 is also the same here. If you're using a professional camera or your phone, most smartphones have pretty decent cameras. You'll easily get a picture with significantly more pixels in that, so that's not even a concern. Um, and then this is where I said 5 or 6 images are ideal. Um, it doesn't have to be something super fancy. It can be different angles of the item. It can be zoomed in images. So maybe if it's like a fabric item, you just get a close picture of the fabric itself to get that quality to show up. If it's something that opens up, you'll have a picture of it open. You'll have a picture of it closed. If it's something that operates and there's a visual distinction between it being when it's operating, when it's not operating, you can have a picture like that. If it's something where if you want to show certain parts because maybe that's a feature that you're highlighting for your item, that your product has this type of part in it that makes it stand out, you could zoom into that part and show that as well. So there's a lot of flexibility here too. But 5 or 6 images, different images, whatever differences there might be, is always good to have, just so it gives that customer that when they're looking at it they can browse through. Even if it's not something you can do super flexible, or you say, oh, this is how am I supposed to get, one image will show enough of the product. It's just there's a habit with online shoppers now where if they see a product that only has one image, um, they get a bit concerned. Simply it just doesn't attract them as much, because when you are an online shopper and you've probably shopped online yourself too, you do always have that nagging concern about whether whatever you're purchasing can be reliably trusted, like you are going to receive what you see. So having more pictures in there that clearly show that you're making the distinctions and it's not just something that somebody photoshopped in different ways, um, will kind of alleviate some of that trust issue that's there. It won't completely resolve it, but when customers look at an item and see there's multiple images, they kind of feel a bit more confident about considering purchasing that item. Um, you should always have at least one product image that's on a white background. Usually marketplaces don't mind if all your other images are taken with some kind of backgrounds, um, as long as that background isn't the main focus. So the item should be the centered focus of the image. Because the white background part is something that they use to keep the design standard on their site. So if we go back to the title, for example, you can see that other than the shirt where they have the model wearing it, you can see that it's just a product and then nothing else. This helps keep the marketplace wants to keep a bit of a standard in the way that their items show up, the listing show up, and commonly that tends to be having it on a white background. So everybody's product is on a clear white background, and this one you can see there's a bit of that color. That's not really an issue. That still counts as white-ish background, but basically there has to be that clear background. there are obvious exemptions you can do if you're selling a product that might be, the color white itself, and putting it on a white background just kind of makes it vanish. You obviously don't want that because you want the product to be shown. So you can put in something contrasting, usually a gray or some kind of toned color that will help make it pop out. So that's an option. You're not going to punish you for something like that because it doesn't make sense to put it on a white background if you can't tell the product apart. But at least having one, if for every other product, having one image in the white background is important to have, because if you are in the marketplace that says your main image, so the first image the customers see has to be a white background, you don't have to worry about preparing that. As you can see in Wayfair, use the first image is actually a lifestyle, and that's because in Wayfair their listing standard is that they have lifestyle images when you're looking through the listings. So in this case, they accept lifestyle as the main image, but there are other marketplaces like Amazon and Walmart where they want the clear background to be the first image that shows for your product. And if it's on your website, it's up to you. If you think that I generally prefer having a lifestyle as the first image, that tends to catch customers' attention better than the product in the white background. But if you think the white background shows your product better, or shows the details of your product better, um, maybe it's maybe it's a jewelry item, or maybe it's something with intrinsic details and you want to highlight those details, then posting it with a white background might be better in your case, because in your case you're trying to really highlight the details of the product as part of the features for selling it. So that makes more sense. Now for video, we won't spend too much time on this because as I mentioned, it's an optional feature in a lot of places and it's still being developed out. But I will hit on some common best practices, just so if you ever get around to making videos, you'll know what's ideal. Um, so you can see less than a minute is preferable for most sites. Like 30 seconds to a minute is generally the standard. Obviously, on your own website, you can always make it longer. But at that point, you might just want to make a brand video where you introduce your company or your brand and then introduce all the products you sell. So if you're going to make a long video, it just makes sense to put in everything. But short videos are good for collections, as well as a brief introduction to your brand. Like I said, it's not available in every marketplace. It's not, it's the reason is that there's a little bit more of a technical requirements, and there's a higher bandwidth usage with videos. So a lot of retailers, they're slowly rolling out videos as their technical capabilities to handle the video traffic and the video storage space increases. So that's why you see there's a limit. And even on your own website, your host will kind of give you an idea of how much video streaming you can have, or how many megabytes or gigabytes of video you can have stored on the website, because videos are a bit more intensive than images are. So that tends to be the main restriction, but it is starting to become more and more common. You've probably, if you've been frequently shopping on Amazon, you might have even seen more and more videos popping up and customers leaving videos as well. So it is something that's slowly becoming more and more common, almost as common as images. But it's not required. And like I said, if you can't really make an actual image out of it, or if it costs too much to make an actual image, as production costs are a bit higher for making videos than getting photography of the products. It can be as easy as taking maybe the lifestyle images or the clear background image or whatever images you have of the various products, and then making an animated slideshow basically. So it's technically a video, but it's really just a whole bunch of pictures back to back and the video is going through them. And what they usually do is that they put in the bullet points or the features and highlights inside, and you can throw in some public domain sounds or music, something generic like that. You can find these. They're available if you use Adobe's services. If you pay for the subscription to Adobe, they have a stock library of that sound as well. But basically, you don't have to go overboard. Um, I will note that in this case, what you're looking at is actually something that the retailer made. So if you have a supplier vendor relationship, there is potential that the supplier, the company you are supplying, the retailer, might be the one that makes the videos, or offers that service. In the case of this seller, um, you can see that Home Depot actually made the video to use using a sample of their product. So they actually physically had the supplier send us an actual unit to Home Depot, and then Home Depot's own marketing team created a video. And through the entire the video, they actually had a Home Depot employee narrating and giving explanations of the product while they made the video out. So that's a unique thing to note as well. If you have a supplier vendor relationship, there is a potential that the retailer you work with might actually be able to give you those video services, but it'll still be something that they won't do for all the products, just because videos require more resources. um, Now, off the bullet points, this is an example from Macy's, but you'll find this on pretty much every website and every marketplace. Um, Bullet points are generally five short to medium highlights that pop up a certain feature of the product or something you want to really push out there that you believe will help the customer make a consideration of whether they want to purchase it. In the case of this perfume, you can see that there's three priority where essentially giving an idea of the scent. Because you obviously can't get that scent from online. So they put in the scent as the three top of the bullet points. And then the other bullet points, in this case, how to use is something they probably put, but the other two is something that the marketplace likely input into it. Because the web ID aspect is related to Macy's, that the link is just a disclaimer. So there are some differences, but generally speaking, on every marketplace, this is how bullet points function. They serve to pop up something important, some features, something the customer needs to know that they can't know, any other way. Um, this is something that they look at after they see the title and the image, because the title and image is kind of the hook that brings them in, and then the bullet points will help them decide if this is something that they're looking for. And you want to make sure you are highlighting the most relevant or the most important features in the bullet points, depending on the category of product you're selling. Because you will even have situations, and it's something that this is the way I even suggest to bring the framework when you're preparing this is, imagine you're writing the bullet points and you're writing bullet points for an item that the title and image aren't visible. So when you're sitting down to write your bullet points, imagine that when the customer opened that product, they don't see the any image, and they don't see the title. So what would you put to tell to in the bullet points to describe this product to a customer who doesn't see the images and doesn't see the title to make their consideration? And the reason I say that is because it's very common for e-commerce customers, and while as your business with e-commerce grows, or once you start it, or if you are in the e-commerce business and you're growing your business, you'll run into customer service situations where the customer will bring up something about the product that you didn't put in the bullet points, but it shows in the title or the images, and you'll be wondering, why is this customer asking me this question when the image obviously shows it? The reason for that is just, some customers, for some reason, they don't really click with the image and the title. It tends to be some things that bring them into looking at your product, but they never actually, when they have that question pop up, they never actually consider the image they're looking at to be the answer to it. What they're going to look at is your bullet points to answer that question. It's very strange aspect of their online shopping habits, but basically the best bullet points are basically the ones where you assume that the customer is looking at your product but doesn't have access to any kind of information, what would you tell them to make them want to consider purchasing the product? What would you tell them to help them understand the product? If you think of it that way when you're preparing your bullet points, you can kind of get ahead of that customer service situation, as well as help increase the odds of somebody considering to purchase your product by answering their questions or answering their thoughts ahead of time. So that's a good frame of mind to take when preparing bullet points. Like I said, some places allow more than 5, including on your website, but I generally recommend that the first 5 bullet points be the most important. And if you are able to add in additional bullet points, then you can just add in those relevant information as necessary. But you should at least have the first 5 be the most important features, to help that customer understand the product and to also make your best pitch to them for them to consider making that purchase. Descriptions and details, as I summarize it, they're pretty straightforward. This is an example of a television on Walmart. So you can see here in the descriptions, they kind of put in a bit of a bullet point model when they put the descriptions in there. So you can see that they have it like a list form with the bold of the highlighting certain features. Like I said, that's totally fine. You can put your bullet points in your descriptions if there's really no reason to add anything else. Maybe you can see here where that next to it they put in some information. That's always an option. You don't if you can't really put in too much information, you can keep it concise. As long as your description doesn't go into like a bit of a rant or start becoming irrelevant, because nowadays a lot of algorithms have gotten a lot smarter, so they are able to distinguish the difference between what an actual contentful description is and what's a word dump is. So you might see some sellers trying to do word dumps with their descriptions, where they just throw in they make these weird sounding descriptions that just chock full of keywords. Algorithms nowadays will realize that that's what you're doing, and will kind of it won't penalize per se, but it'll consider the low quality description. So that word dump method doesn't really work anymore. So you want to keep your description. It's less of the quantity and more of a quality situation. So as long as you keep it nice and precise, and there's additional information, you don't have to worry about making it super long. Like I said, one thing that works, as you can see here in this description, they don't have it that way. But one thing that works is that maybe having a paragraph in there, or a few sentences in there describing your brand. That always helps to increase a bit more of the size of your description. Putting in some kind of introduction of your brand and what it stands for and types of products and why they should consider purchasing from your brand. You can put that kind of information in there, and then have the next paragraph go into the product descriptions, and then break it down from there. And then at the bottom where it says specifications, it'll usually be either specifications or product details, depending on how the marketplace names it. But you see on the left column, it'll say display technology, resolution, manufacturer. These are product data that gets asked when creating any kind of electronic item on Walmart. So depending on whatever category you're opening items in, you'll see different information it asks for. Some of this information will be required. Some of it is actually optional, but when you do fill it out, it pops up here. If you leave it blank, it won't show up here at all. The row won't exist. But if you do put the information in, it'll show up here and show to the customer in the specifications, and have a bit of that SEO impact as well. In your own website, I should note that when you're creating your own website, you are able to create your own specifications. You'll usually get a default from whatever company you use to host your e-commerce, whether it's WooCommerce, BigCommerce, Shopify. They'll have their default template, but you can add additional attributes, and these attributes can be these specifications, which you then proceed to fill out so it shows up on your website when people go to the listing. You do have that ability as well for your own self-hosted e-commerce business. So keywords, obviously images for this are not exactly other than showing some words, is not really the best way to present it. So I used Amazon's search system to kind of give an idea of what I kind of mean by keywords. So Amazon calls these search terms, but on the back end they call them keywords. It's just a weird distinction between how they label their systems data. But uh, these bookshelf speakers, bookshelf kids, bookshelf white, these are technically keywords. Obviously, if the title or the bullet point description has these words in it, the Amazon search results will pull them. Like I said, the first one, it checks the title. So any titles that have these words in it will be prioritized. But outside of that, products that have these as keywords have a chance to pop up as results as well. Even if the keyword is bookshelf and it doesn't have, let's say, speaker stands, but your bookshelf you can put speaker stand on your bookshelf, or it comes with some kind of connection for that. But it's not a speaker stand. You can kind of use that as a keyword. So if someone looking for a bookshelf that can do that, as well as they're looking for speaker stands, in this case, it might pop up as in the results, because even if the title doesn't necessarily have it, enough keywords exist that when the system exhausts the titles, it finds keywords instead. Now, this is for Amazon. Other marketplaces have their own structures to it, but all of them will have a keyword section when creating items. Even your own website will have it, even if your website doesn't create this kind of automatic search term list. It'll have some effect. Listing one thing I recommend, and just a note, they tend to call these organic results, or organic search results. What that means is that if you look at any of the websites or your marketplace, you probably see a lot of sponsored or advertised products, or promoted is what they call it sometimes too, on a listing. Those are basically people who are paying money to get their keywords to pop up as a sponsored item. That goes more into the pay-per-click advertising aspect. But pay-per-click advertising is essentially monetized keywords, in that you're bidding to get your product to show up for certain keywords when searched. Organic means that you put the keywords in there and they passively have an impact. Obviously, the sponsored one tends to be a bit more aggressive in popping up because there's money involved. But the back end keywords that are passively generating organic, boosting your organic search visibility, that one doesn't cost you anything. So that's another reason why there's no harm to putting in keywords to your products when you're creating them. I put here, like I said, there's different ways you can get keywords, but one thing I put into is I like to use is the Google Trends tool. So if you go to the Google Trends tool that Google gives, it basically lets you search terms, and then drill down by country, location, time frame. And what it does is that it'll show you the that term, that search term's popularity and search frequency in Google. So this is technically be relevant to Google, but the reason I like to use it is because a search term that gets searched with high frequency on Google is likely going to be something that gets searched on respective marketplaces by people searching for those products. So if people are searching some of these words frequently in Google, and these search terms are relevant to your product, you can incorporate them. And an added advantage is that the Google Trends will actually show you similar terms. So if I went to Google Trends and I wrote bookshelf as the word that I want to start with, I'll actually get a list of top searched search terms that include the word bookshelf in it. So I won't just get information about the word specifically bookshelf. I'll get information about what people are searching that has a word bookshelf in it. And you can use that to parse out popular keywords, and then use those as the keywords for your product. So if you see people are searching wood bookshelf or white bookshelf, and you put in the word bookshelf, but you saw that white bookshelf was a high search term, like people were the most frequent search term for whatever time period you're looking in, you can take that and use that as a keyword, for example. And then put that as the search term you use in the Google Trends. Erase your bookshelf search, then put in white bookshelf, and then start the process again, and then see what breaks down from there. So you can always dig deeper and deeper using tools like Google Trends. It's like I said, it's for Google, not necessarily for the marketplaces. But generally speaking, it'll give a nice idea of what kind of keywords you can utilize on for your backend. So it's something useful to take a look at. I should also note on the side that it's also kind of useful for product research as well. So if you're looking to sell products, you can actually search the product category, product type, and then see what's popular, and then use that as research data for trying to figure out what type of product, whether you're looking to get started in e-commerce with the product, or you want to expand your catalog and you're trying to figure out, what I should add to my existing listings, and then you can use that as well. Now we're gonna get into item creation and submission. I'm gonna just go over the basics. There's two types of item creation methods. There's a lot more details to this, but it's very category specific, so I can't really give too much generic information because it depends a lot on the marketplace you're selling on and the type of product you're selling. There's huge variations between them, but commonly speaking, the information you need is this is for the manual process. So manual process means you use the platform itself on the browser to create the products. It's usually good for opening a few items, a small number of items, because you do need to usually have to do them one by one, or if it's a marketplace that allows you to have multiple, they have to be similar collection, because the data will copy over. So it's not useful if you're opening a lot of items, but if you're opening a few items, a small number of items, using the manual process, if that marketplace gives that to you. Some marketplaces don't really have much of a manual process. If you have that option, it's there, and this is how it's used. There's small differences between the common information required between the manual and the template. That's because the manual will sometimes sync certain data from your account information, whereas the template is fully blank. So common information required is always going to be title, description, category, and identifiers are every marketplace will ask for that. I wrote down UPC, but there's actually two identifiers. One is SKU, which is a stock keeping unit, which is the products what should I say, identifier. Some people use numbers and then they on your end. So it should be an identifier that you use to identify the product. Some people use numbers, some people use certain codes. So one example I can give is, let's say you're selling something that's let's see, oak collection, black table, and it's the first model of that. You can do something like OK, OK BK, and then put one, or OK BK TBL-1. Whatever makes sense to you when creating it, but essentially what you're doing is that you're giving it a identifier, the model number, something that you can use to help identify. Like I said, some companies use numbers or some weird mess of numbers and letters. I generally recommend that if you have a small catalog, to kind of use something a bit more precise and understandable. Note that you usually have 12 to 15 character limit when creating that. But putting in numbers, the problem is that you have to. It helps that you can identify your product immediately when you see the SKU somewhere. So if you got a report downloaded, for example, and it's you see the SKU column or the model column, will write down that identifier. If it's a whole bunch of numbers and you're not really sure what those numbers refer to, that's not a situation you want to be in. You want to be able to look at that model number and from memory be able to say, okay, this is this product, this is this product. So when you're preparing it, I recommend doing it that way. Obviously you can create a reference manual where you'll have the numbers, and then you can always go back to the reference manual and say, okay, this number is actually this item, this number is this item. But that's a bit of a hassle. And it's you can do that if you can't really come up with something, but I generally recommend trying to come up with something that's coded with letters that you can easily understand what product in question is being brought up. because these big companies that use those weird combination of alphanumeric, they use programs called product syndication, and we're actually going to get to that towards the end of this presentation. But they use like product syndicators and product information managers, which are platforms that manage their product data, and they're integrated through API or EDI, so there's technical connection. So they have a computer handling it. So obviously in the computer's case, when it receives that info, the computer is able to process it, and they're able to see the relevant product. So that's why larger companies are able to do that, because they don't need to memorize it, because the computer does it for them. In your case, that setup is expensive, so I recommend having model numbers set up in a way that is easy for you to look at and from memory say this is this product. So identifier, and then UPC is the barcodes. This is something you have to get from GS1, because they're the official UPC providers, as well as a bunch of other identifier stuff. But UPC marketplaces will ask for that. They call it, some places call it like external ID. If you are selling a European product, you might have an EAN, which is Europe's version of a UPC. And if you're selling books, your UPC will you won't have a UPC, you'll have an ISBN. So it depends on the product, but having that and then the model number, the SKU is usually the common identifiers. Price and MSRP will be asked on both our regular marketplaces where you're selling products direct to customers, as well as supplier relationship where you're doing a wholesale model with an online retailer. When it's the seller one, the MSRP doesn't really do anything per se, because you're setting your own price. So the price is the MSRP, but some places do ask for like an MSRP section. Sometimes it's because if you're running a sale and you're doing a certain percent off, then maybe the MSRP will show, and then it'll show the price, and then it'll show the percentage difference as the sale discount. It depends on how the marketplace has it set up. It matters more in the wholesale model, because in the wholesale model, the price, the payments you're receiving are on a price basis or cost basis, and MSRP is what that supplier is using to figure out how much to charge as the listing. Because sellers like Home Depot, for example, you sell to them at cost. So let's say you're selling the product at $10, and then when it gets ordered, you technically get $10. But the selling price is what Home Depot puts. So let's say Home Depot puts $20 to sell it. So Home Depot receives $20, and then they give you your $10 cost price. Sometimes they run in situations where they're not really sure how to price it. And in those cases, it helps to put the MSRP so they understand what a good price it is to put on the market, because sometimes they might accidentally put a high price or a very low price. So the MSRP gives them guidance, but that's pretty much where it factors in. Images, in the case of manual, usually the way it works is that you upload the image. So there'll be an image section where you click on the button to select the image files to upload it. Very straightforward. And then you'll have sections where you provide product dimensions and weight and shipping dimensions and weight. Product dimensions and weight will just be the product itself. Shipping dimensions will be how the product is shipped. Some products are rolled up, some products are compressed, some products are folded, depends on the product. But your shipping dimension will sometimes usually be different from the product dimension. So you'll be entering that information as well when you're doing it manually. You can see in template that more or less it's the same. Except you'll note that images isn't here. The reason that is that I usually recommend for images, you can use the templates for images, but the way it works is that it wants an image URL. So your image has to be uploaded somewhere that you can copy a web address from that links directly to that image to be able to list it. It's something you can do with Dropbox. It's something you can do if you have a WordPress website and you upload it into a library, it'll generate a code. But it's an extra step. It's not the same as being able to upload it directly to that marketplace or the retailer and then just do it the easy way. So my recommendation, unless you already have that URL process set up where you have the URL for the images, I usually like to do it as filling out the template. And then if there's a variation, I usually recommend using templates to create variations, where it's basically like if you have the same item in 10 colors, you can use a template to set up that variation. So when people go to the listing, they'll see the options there. Usually on manual, you'll either won't have that option at all, or it's a bit more tedious. On template, it's a lot easier to do, if applicable, of course. And then for images, not to give in most templates, the image section, they'll only want one main image. If you don't have that either, you can grab, you can go to Google and find some generic that's has a thing license, public use license. So I'm going to generic. It can even just be a white background. So anything you can find as blank, give that as a URL. I recommend looking up for something that has a like a public domain license, which means it's an image you can use, without running into copyright infringement issues. And then you can put that as the image, as something blank and generic, and then you'll go to the marketplaces platform where you would have done it manually, and then go to each of the image items you open and upload the images that way. Now, of course, if you're opening a lot of items, let's say like 100, 200, doing it that manual way will obviously take time, but in that case, you'll have to figure out how you can get image URLs set up so you can do it. But if you're opening 10, 20 items, I recommend just, putting the one required image, something generic, something blank, and then going into the marketplace's manual section and then actually getting to upload the images, just because it's less tedious. And the benefit is that, let's say on Amazon, for example, you put the images in. Once you do that, it'll actually create a URL to that image, which you can access if you go to Amazon, you click on your image and you right click on it and open image in new tab, for example. You'll actually be able to see the URL. And then if you're using another marketplace, you can use that URL in that template. So once you do it on one site that generates it for you, then you'll be able to copy that URL for other future templates on other marketplaces. So the first marketplace you do it on, you'll probably be adding the images manually, but then you'll be able to use the link it creates to your images to open them on templates in other marketplaces. So that's just a recommendation I have, just to expedite things for you and make it a bit simple. And I'm going to give image examples of 3 different types of templates from 3 marketplaces. Note that these columns tend to change by category. There are basic columns that are same for every category, and then there'll be additional category relevant columns that change depending on the template you download. So this is a Walmart example, and you can see this was a clothing category template. Now, most of the initial information is related to the core info, so it doesn't change by category per se. You can see here that the red ones are required, and then you have optional and recommended. The way that Walmart does it is that optional means you don't have to fill it out at all, and recommended usually means it's optional, but it can become required if you fill out some other recommended field. So that it's a weird terminology there, but you'll see in this case it has that red note, meaning that there's a note inside of it. They do give that explanation. Every template will come with an instructions and that definition page. You can see it here as well on the bottom of the sheets. If you're filling out a template and you're not sure what to fill out, or you're not sure what it's asking you, because sometimes the header request can be a bit weird, like it won't make any sense. You'll always have that data definition to help you understand what information it actually wants in there, as well as instructions that will give you an idea of how to fill it out. And some instructions will give you a support contact email that you can reach out to for additional assistance if you run into that. This is an Amazon one. So this is their Seller Central one. The templates for all the categories will be more or less similar. As you can see here, right next to the yellow, you can see that there's a main image URL one. You can see that that's a different color because that is required. And then the yellow ones that are other images are actually optional, so that's not required. So that fits into where the role I said that you should put some kind of generic link to a public domain image that's blank or abstract, and you can update it on Amazon once you go in. So you'll see these are the common information, and then there's category information. This one you can see here. Unique thing about Amazon is that it has data definitions, but it also has browse data and valid values. And the use for that is that data definitions define the columns in what the column wants, but the valid values in the browse data will actually show you the options that you can input. And the reason that's helpful is that if you read the data definition, but now you're wondering like what should I enter here? This is usually a question that comes with style related matters. You can always go to those sheets and then take a look and see what they consider valid values, and then use whichever one is relevant for your case. So it has a bit more additional information. And then this is a Wayfair one. So as you can see in all three of them, they more or less ask similar questions on the basic level, as well as it'll be similar in the category one as well. So there isn't too much variation. There's just variation in how they design it, how they define it, how it looks, and that kind of affects how easy or hard it is for you to set up products. So they're more or less all, once you create a template for one marketplace, you'll generally be able to use that same data to create the products on the other marketplaces. So that's an advantage as well. And that actually factors into the last topic here, which is master data. So master data is basically a copy of your product information of all your products and all the relevant information about that product. This will be titles, identifiers, description, bullet point, keywords, everything related, dimensions, everything related to your product that could possibly be possibly data related to your product. Your master data um, would and should have that information. There are two ways to go about it. The most basic and budget-friendly way is Excel or Google Sheets. I generally recommend Google Sheets if you're working as a team and you have a Google setup, because then you can share it with the team and then collaborate on it. But if everything's being done on one device and there isn't multiple people working on it, an Excel copy is good to have. You'll want to set it. You'll always be expanding on it as you sell on more marketplaces and see different information. But the reason you want to do this is because, one, you want to have your product information kept on a master data sheet where it'll have all your product information for you, and two is so you can copy paste the data as necessary to help fill out templates to make your life easier. It's a very straightforward process. It'll let you breeze right through templates because you have all the data you need ahead of time on hand. Now, the next level past this is something called product data syndication or product information management. What happens here is that it's actually you use a third-party platform that gives you access to a master data template, and then you fill out. It's the same logic as Excel one where you fill out all the relevant information. But what happens here is that in many of them, you get an option to define columns and match them to other marketplace ones. So companies that I gave here, for example, will have options where, let's say they're partnered with Amazon and Home Depot and Walmart. And as you saw in the templates, there's variations in the header data that Amazon Walmart uses when they refer to something. So what Amazon might refer to as SKU might be referred to on Home and Walmart as model number. They're the same thing, but there's different header data. What these platforms do is that they let you put in your SKU or model number or whatever you want to call it. You put in that information, but then you can define that header or that column as being the same thing as an Amazon SKU, a Walmart header, a Walmart model number, let's say a Home Depot manufacturer number, whatever variations there are. It lets you define it universally. So the reason you would do that is because these sites have integrations with various marketplaces and retailers, and that allows them, beyond creating templates and beyond creating manual inputs, some marketplaces are currently integrated in a way where you can use syndication to create items. So essentially what it does is that it takes the data of the master data you made, and then you pick the retailer, you pick the products, you pick the retailer, and then when you hit the syndicate button, the data in that third-party platform will be processed, prepared the way for that whatever marketplace is being sent to, and then it'll be pushed to that partner, and then the items will be opened on it as if you had created a template or entered it manually. The reason for this is that it helps maintain large catalogs, and it helps simplify the process of adding products to on the channels. Most PDS, PIM platforms are integrated with a lot of the online marketplaces and retailers by now because of the ease that provided. So I gave a few examples here. Costs vary, so I can't guarantee a specific budget. They generally base it off of the number of SKUs, and they charge like a monthly subscription fee. Some are not super expensive, some are a bit more expensive, some have fewer partners, some have more partners. So that's something you can research. Now, this won't put you in a situation where you won't be like, I can't do this until I have more money. It does cost more money than Excel, obviously, but if you have a lot of products and you're trying to manage them and you're planning to sell in multiple marketplaces, you can reach out to these companies and see how much they will charge you, and then use that. And another aspect is that it's a tertiary thing, but it always is an opportunity. Um, because these companies are like officially partnered with these marketplaces, sometimes they might be able to help make connections with marketplaces that you want to sell on. Like it's not a guaranteed thing, but it is an opportunity because partner means that these two companies have interacted with each other and can send referrals to each other. So that is another way to kind of, especially if you're looking to do the supplier on vendor model where you do wholesale to online retailers, this will create a one venue that you can use to try to get referred and maybe catch a bit of attention. And like I said, the pricing depends on the respective platform and the number of items you're trying to open. It's a subscription as a service, so there'll be monthly fees. I believe they do usually charge a small one-time setup fee as well, and then they'll have fees for other types of uses that you may or may not need. So it's worth checking it out and getting quotes. If you are looking to, if you basically want to create data once and manage it through that platform, and then just syndicate it out as necessary, including to make updates. If that sounds a bit easier for you. So it is something to look into, and also something to consider in the future when it becomes Excel and Google Sheets become hard to manage. These things can become useful as well. So that's why I note that it'll be sufficient for most categories, sufficient for onboarding, and then in the future when things get a bit more complicated, then you can consider using these services. So we're going to get into the question and answer section here and see what we have. So first question we have is about permission to sell. Okay, so one thing that I didn't specifically note because we're trying to keep a broad general approach is that yes, there are categories that are restricted access, and what you need to do on every marketplace will have its own process, but generally speaking, what's required is that you're supposed to contact their support team or whichever team is responsible. In the case of Amazon and Walmart, support team is more than enough, where you then have to request permission to sell in a category. And then what's going to happen is that the support team is going to get back to you telling you what information they want to allow you to sell in that category. It'll depend on the category itself, because some categories they want safety information, some categories they want insurance, and some categories they want you to have a trademark registered. It's simple as that. So it depends, and if it's food items, for example, they'll want certifications. So it depends on the category, but basically you'll want to contact their support team, tell them you're looking to access a restricted category and let them know what category it is, and their team will return back to you with instructions on what data they want to be able to give you that permission. They'll tell you what information to send over, and then maybe they'll ask for some kind of additional description information. You'll prepare that, send that over, and then hopefully if they don't have any questions or concerns, they'll authorize you to sell in that category. Pop Shop Live, I'm not necessarily familiar with that platform per se, but um, when it comes to selling online, my understanding is that it sounds like a platform to sell products. When it comes to that, one thing I generally recommend is that there isn't really, I won't say there's necessarily like a bad place to sell and a good place to sell, because when it comes to e-commerce, you're not physically setting up anywhere, so um, you're not really you are able to put listings everywhere you want. But one thing you want to consider is is the categories being hosted here, if applicable, relevant to mine. If it is a marketplace that has all kind of categories, that's not really a question. Second question is, what kind of traffic is that site getting? You want, because what you need is to be able to, to sell, you need customers, you need people coming in. So if you are setting up on sites to sell products, you want to know what kind of traffic they're getting and how their platform works for you. Is it easy to use? Is it complicated? Does it give you the features that you are looking for to best sell your product? Whichever one is affecting that user experience for you and is getting traffic, that will help gauge it. And cost, how much does it cost to sell on there? My general approach to e-commerce early on is that proliferation to marketplaces is not a bad idea, as long as it's not costing you a lot of money, because having access to all that diverse traffic is good. But if you're paying money to sell on the platform and you're not able to it's not getting traffic, or it's a site that allows you to self-host and you're not able to use tools to get traffic, that is something to take into consideration. So everything revolves around traffic. Is that site getting traffic if it's a marketplace, or are you able to use the features that that platform gives you to get traffic to your site or to your catalog or wherever you list the products? Those are two of the most important questions to have, whether it's a marketplace or if it's selling on a self-hosted. Because if you're not getting enough traffic, you're not getting enough people to sell to, and that kind of defeats the purpose. Their software converts. Not precisely. That's a bit of a machine learning situation. Unfortunately, computer generated descriptions are still very obvious. And last year or so, actually, I forget when that last Google update was, but Google made a algorithm update a while back that kind of smartened up to machine generated descriptions. And it's something marketplaces actually tested themselves. Walmart and Home Depot, for example, went down the route of computer-generated titles and bullet points. Unfortunately, it's computer-generated is when I mean software, computer-generated descriptions and other data like that. The computer can't get the proper syntax down, and it becomes very obvious that it was not written by a person. And most search engines and algorithms on marketplaces are able to figure out that those descriptions are not man-made, basically. So I'm not familiar with a specific software that can convert Excel to individual descriptions, but generally speaking, such software would have very limited use nowadays, because that conversion process just it just feels robotic. What manual process I usually have seen used is people will create an Excel file. Well, they'll have a category description for their item. They'll have the bullet points, and then they'll have a column with the brand information, and then they'll use a formula to combine them into like a paragraph for a description. So they'll combine all the cells, and then have that turned into essentially a entire paragraph description, which is kind of convenient, because if it's a category, and let's say you have 3 different categories, you would only have to write 3 three category descriptors from your basis. So from not like a general description of the category, but on the basis of the category within the context of you selling it or within the context of your brand. You create three of that and then just copy it into the relevant cells for the products. Then you create a brand description, which will apply to all the products. So you only do it once. And then you'll have the bullet points, which will probably vary slightly depending on the product. And then you'll have a final column that's called description. And then you'll use the formula to combine everything into a actual description. So you'll do equal, and then there's a formula for it, but the lazy way is essentially use pick the cell, use the and symbol, pick the cell, use the and symbol, pick the cell, use the and symbol. And then when you hit enter, Excel will combine all the right text in those cells into a combination, which will then be you can use as a description early on. That is a process you can use to simplify the description trading early on, get started quickly, and then later on you can develop that out and improve on it further. So that is one thing I recommend using Excel for. You can use the formulas in there to combine data to create descriptions, and it'll still look more natural than if you had some kind of software doing it. Multi-channel software, I do recommend it as your business grows. One thing to consider is that there are costs involved. So if you're still setting up on multiple marketplaces, if you're just started selling, it might not be worth it because one thing I like to do is that early on you want to get a physical hands-on experience with the actual platform. You want to get an understanding of the platform yourself, and two is that you want to have built up some sales traction on that platform before considering setting up multi-channel, because once you've proven the product to sell on a few key platforms that you set up on, then you can get into multi-channel to centralize your business operations. So the way you should look at multi-channel is not a starting point, but something to help centralize your business to make it easy to manage. And when you reach a point where you do need to centralize, you can consider multi-channel. And then once you have that multi-channel set up to centralize and your existing business, you can continue to use that multi-channel to grow your business. So first you want to build up some of that momentum. And then once things are going and you're a bit comfortable with the different platforms and how they function and what they look like and how you can manually intervene in case a situation comes up, then I recommend looking at multi-channel software, checking the pricing. You want to make sure you're not losing any of your profits too much. You don't want it cutting your margin out. You want to make, because if you're getting anything you're getting with software should amplify your business. It shouldn't be an expense. It shouldn't have a negative impact. The whole point of software is to boost your sales in any way possible. So once you are at that level where multi-channel will help in that process, then you can go ahead and get started. Most people do start using multi-channel software at that point because it helps keep staff costs a bit low. It helps if you're a one-man show. It helps manage the business. So it's helpful once you are at that point where it'll actually help boost your business. Is there anything? What can't I see? Let me check the chat real quick. Nothing in chat. All right. So yeah, it looks like no other questions here. Hopefully the answers were helpful clarifying it, as well as the webinar in regarding just how you should plan your strategy for creating products, as well as knowing what options you have going forward.
Okay, great. Thank you so much, Ahmed, for that informative presentation and for your time today. Just give me one moment to just share my screen, just so you can view our contact information. Okay, great. So I just want to redirect you all to the chat. There you will find some of our upcoming events, the link to our Eventbrite page, and as well the link to our website. Everything should be there. I'm just going to leave you all with about 4 upcoming webinars that we have in the next few weeks. I strongly suggest that you can just copy this text and paste it into Word or Google Docs, or just somewhere where you can store these links so that you can register for the events that are of interest of you after the webinar has ended. I also would like to remind you that you will be receiving a video replay as well as the presentation slides within 24 to 48 hours. So you can always refer back to the information in the future. After this webinar in the browser, you will see a survey pop up. I would really appreciate it if you can just take a few minutes to complete that. That survey will help us to adjust our presentations in the future, as well as give us some information on the kind of assistance you may be needing. So if you have some time to complete that, your feedback is much appreciated. And on that note, we will now end this webinar. I want to thank you all for taking the time out to attend, for your questions, for participating, and we look forward to seeing you at our future webinars. Have a great weekend, everyone.